over here on the left in content, in week 2, these are the notes that I'm working out of. So anybody who wasn't here, or if you want to go ahead and download them now real quick, this is what I'm going to work off of. It's a Word document. You can just pull it up and go through it like that. We went all the way up to multiplying and dividing integers. So I'm going to be starting today on page, which is this, 10. All right. So let me get this pulled up here too. Okay, so when you multiply and divide integers, it's a positive symbol. You've got 2 things you got to keep in mind. They are either both the same sign or they're different signs, and they've got different rules from what we were talking about the other day. When you're multiplying or dividing, same signs will be, set this down. The same signs will be positive, and different signs will be negative. Okay, and that applies to whether you're multiplying or dividing, but 2 at a time. So if you have a whole bunch of things strung together that are being multiplied, you do them 2 at a time, work out their signs, and then just go through it left to right. So for this example here on the notes page, number 9, it's -5 times -3. They're just putting these in parentheses to try to get you acquainted with the different ways that they write this. It just means multiply. So 5 times 3 is 15. That's not going to change. And then you got to decide at what sign you want to make it. So since they're both negative, they're the same, you're going to keep it positive. And that's it. So the answer is positive 15. All right, so here we go. So number 10, it looks like fraction form, but a fraction bar means division. So what they're asking you to do is divide -30 by +5. So 30 divided by 5 is 6. That part doesn't change. Then you just need to decide on what sign you're going to use. Since you have different signs, your final answer should be negative. Number 11 is multiplication again. 8 times 4 is 32. And different signs means negative. And then for number 12, they're writing it in fraction form, but they want you to divide -18 divided by -6. Same signs as positive, so this is going to be +3. Questions about any of that? Okay. When I hear silence, I assume everybody is good. Okay. I'm going to skip the independent practice for now because we've already gone through this, except for I'm going to pull out a couple of the adding and subtracting ones that we haven't talked about yet, just to review what we talked about last time. So I'm going to leave these up here too, and we're going to put adding and subtracting over here. All right, so when you are adding, let's start with that. You look at same signs and different signs also, but totally different set of rules than the multiplying and dividing. When you're adding same signs, you're supposed to add your values and then you keep the sign of whatever it is. So 2 positives stay a positive, 2 negatives stay a negative in this case. When you're talking about different signs and you're adding, you subtract the values and you keep the sign of the larger number. And then as far as subtracting goes, it's keep the first number, change your minus, change your sign. Once you do that, you change your minus to a plus, you'll have addition, and then you can go back up and use these 2 rules again. And that way you don't have to keep track of another 6 rules. That's just too much stuff to memorize, in my opinion. All right, so for number 13, we'll just pick that one first. You have -8 plus -2. Since you're already starting with addition, you don't change anything. You just look at what you've got. You've got same signs. Negative and a negative means you add them up and you keep their sign. So they're both negative. They're gonna, final answer is gonna stay negative. Just as if you borrow $8 from somebody and then go and borrow more, you borrow $2 more, you're now gonna owe that person $10. All right, let me pull out and do 15 now. 15 says -5 minus -6. So now you do start with subtraction. This is when you change. So the rule is keep the first number the same, then you change your minus. So this thing right here is going to turn to a plus, and then you change the next sign. So this -6 is now positive, and we've transformed the problem into -5 plus 6. Now you're adding again. So now we can go back up and look what we're supposed to do now. You have a negative, you have a positive, so you have different signs. We're going to subtract them. Subtract the values, that's a 1. And then keep the sign of the larger number, which is the 6, and the 6 is positive. So this is going to stay the 1. Okay. Any questions? Because I'm about to add all of this together, put it all together with the order of operations. All right. Okay, so then let's move down here and let's talk about this. So with the order of operations, these are the steps that you have to follow anytime you have mixed operations in a problem. Probably all of you know this as please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. If you do remember that, this is what these all mean. So the P in please stands for parentheses. E is exponents. Square roots would be done there too if you had any, but we're not going to talk about that right now. Multiplication and division then come next, and this is the step that people mess up the most. Multiplication and division are supposed to come at the same time in one step. They are not separate steps. You take them out from left to right. So if you have both multiplication and division in a problem, you do it, just go left to right until it's all done. Then you move on and do the 4th step. The 4th step is addition and subtraction. And the same rule applies for that. If you've got both, you take it left to right. You don't necessarily do addition first, then do all your subtraction. You just do whatever you see first in the problem. So before I even do the guided practice, I want to show you what I'm talking about in case that didn't quite all make sense. If it was a problem like this, let's say it was 20 divided by 2 times 3. Some people, when they go through this, they think that they always have to multiply before they divide, because that's how the steps are written usually. So they check off all their multiplication first, then they look for all their division, and in a problem like this, that would be wrong, because these two are actually supposed to be done together and not separate. These are not separate steps. So you're looking for whatever you see first to do it correctly. In this case, dividing is what you're supposed to be doing. 20 divided by 2 is 10. Then you multiply, and you would get 30. If you don't do it in this order and you do the multiplications first, you would have had 20 divided by 2 times 3 is 6. 20 divided by 6 is definitely not 30, and this answer would be wrong. So you got to be careful when you're doing that step. Like I said, that's the one that people mess up the most. As far as I'm concerned, I don't write it out like this to try to help me remember. I do this. I still use please excuse my dear Aunt Sally to remember what I'm supposed to write, but this helps me remember that I don't necessarily have to do the multiplication first. Now, one more thing. Let me get rid of all this. Hopefully I don't confuse anybody even further. If it was like this, then you would multiply, because going left to right, now you do hit the multiplication first. So you would do this first. 20 times 2 would give you 40. And then 40 divided by 3 doesn't come out evenly. That would be a decimal, but that's what you would do in a case like this. You take it left to right, and whatever you hit first is what you do first. Hopefully that clarifies that little piece right there. Okay, so now let's take a look at the problems on the screen here. We got 5 plus 30 divided by 6. Where did you guys? Okay, that's okay, Ashley. And times 4. Hopefully the recording works today, in case you need to go back and fill anything in. Okay, so according to my steps, I'm supposed to do parentheses first. I don't have anything, and then exponents, and I don't have anything there. So I'm going to skip right here and look for multiplication and division. I see both, so when I scan it left to right, I hit division first. That means this is where I start. So when I do these problems, I isolate the piece that I'm working on, and I bring everything else down step by step. I don't write things above and try to skip around, because that's when people tend to get lost in what they're doing. So 30 divided by 6 is 5. And then everything else that I didn't isolate, I'm going to bring down. So the 5, the plus, and the times 4, I'm going to bring that down and then look at it again. I still need to finish the step right here that I'm on. So I'm going to multiply next and bring down. And then all that should be left at the end is adding and subtracting, which leaves the problem to be pretty easy when you get to that last part. So my final answer for this should be 25. Okay, let's move down. And I'm going to move this over. Okay, so 10 times 3 minus 12 minus 4 in parentheses. Wait, I can't get rid of that little thing right here. I'm sorry, that's in the way. Here, let me do it that way. All right, so again, I'm going to run through my steps. Starting with, in this case, the parentheses now. So inside the parentheses, I can do something. Sometimes parentheses will be in your problem and there'll just be one number inside of them. That means you can't do anything inside and they're there for something else, which can be very confusing at times, but you're just looking inside and looking to see if there's anything you can do to them inside. Since I can, I start with that and I'm going to drop everything else down. I'm going to keep my parentheses there for just a second, just to talk about this. When answers come out to be negative inside your parentheses, you want to keep the parentheses. If they come out to be just a number like this and then there's a minus sign in front, you can actually just discard them. But keeping them won't hurt anything, so feel free to do that. Then I want to look for exponents. I don't have any. Multiplication and division, I have that, so I'll do that next. Bring down, and then at the end, the last step should be easy, so I'm just going to subtract this. And that one's done. So far, so good? Yes. Okay. All right, with number 3, here's what I'm talking about. Inside parentheses, I just see one number there. I can't do anything with that. That means they're not, the parentheses are not there for the P step. In this case, they're there to show you the exponent is only attached to the 3 in this case. So that's where we're going to start. We skip the P, we go to the E. With exponents, remember, this repeated multiplication. It means that you need 2 3s. So you multiply 3 times 3 together. It's not 3 times 2. It's 2 of these things multiplied together. So this is a 9. Bring everything else down. Exponent is done. I'm going to leave this in parentheses for now because there's nothing next to the 4. And that means those parentheses are there for another reason now, and that's multiplication. That's what I'm going to do next. 4 times 9 is 36, and then it's easy from here. Okay, and the last one looks like a mess. So we're gonna pick it apart into 2 different little mini problems and put it together at the end. Okay, so I'm going to start with the top of this problem first. When you see a giant fraction bar like this, that means divide. But it also means that there are invisible parentheses around the top and the bottom of whatever this expression is. They don't write them because it's assumed that you know that they're there. And now that I just told you, hopefully you remember that. But the top has parentheses, the bottom has parentheses. They don't write them, but they are actually there. And what that means is, since that's the step we start with, we're going to just work with the top. Then we're going to just do the bottom, and then we'll put it together at the end. So I'm going to do my exponent here next. That's 12 times 12. And then 144 minus 14 is 130. That's not my final answer, that's just the answer to the top right there. Then I'm going to go and try to knock out this bottom. So 45 minus 2, parentheses, 3 plus 1, then that whole thing is squared. So within the bottom here, I see a little set of parentheses right there. That's where I'm going to begin. And I'm going to bring everything else down. Parentheses are done. Then I'm going to move on to my exponent. So this is 4 times 4. It's 4 to the second power. 4 times 4 is 16. So that takes care of the exponent step. That's done. Now I'm going to look for multiplication and division. I see multiplication right here. 2 times 16 is 32. Bring it down. And let's see. 45 minus 13 is, what am I talking about? 45 minus 32 is 13. Okay, and there's the bottom. Okay, now we took care of all of that. At the end, when you see something like this, oops, if you can divide it through, you divide it at the end. If not, that means you're just going to have a fraction as an answer. But since we haven't talked about fractions yet, you should not be getting those just yet. Next week, we'll talk about that. So 130 divided by 13 does divide evenly, and the final answer is 10. All right, that takes care of the order of operations for now. Do we have questions? Okay. All right, so next up, we're just going to wrap this all up. These are just more practice problems. So since you guys had no questions, I'm going to assume you're good and we're going to skip this. I want to just bring in some word problems because this is a lot like what you're going to see on your homework. So we're going to walk through a few of these and then that should wrap it up for today. So starting with this one here. One year, the highest temperature in Western New York was 105 degrees, while the lowest was 18 degrees below zero. What is the difference between those temperatures? So first you need to represent the numbers that you see here. You've got 105, positive 105 that you're starting with, and 18 degrees below zero. So below zero would be negative. Those are your two values. They want to know what the difference is between those. The word difference means subtract. So I need to subtract those two values. That's how this one at least translates to. Now, when I go to carry out the calculation, I've got to bring in the rules for integers now. Since I'm subtracting a negative, this is when I can do the keep, change trick. And I'm going to, because it'll make it easier. So you keep the 105, you change your minus, and then you change your sign of the whatever comes second. That transforms the problem into this, which is very easy then. Just add them up. It's 123 degrees for the difference. And hopefully that makes sense, because if you think about this, if you're 18 below, you're somewhere around here, it takes 18 degrees just to get to zero, plus an additional 105 to get all the way up here. So the entire length of that would be about 120, 123. Makes sense. Okay, number 2 is very similar. One morning it was negative 15. By noon it increased 7 degrees. And what was the temperature at noon? So you're starting with negative 15. And then increased means plus. So here is your expression. You're adding different signs. So you subtract the values and you keep the sign of the bigger value, which will be negative. So by noon, it's negative 8. Okay, with number 3, let me skip this over. We're talking about profits and losses. So profits are positives, losses are negatives. In November, your company had a loss of $2,400, and then due to an aggressive sales campaign, your profits were $4,350 for the month of December. How much more did the company earn in December than in November? All right, so what it says here is how much more did it earn in December than November? So you need to go with December 1st as your first value. Then November was a loss of $2,400. And the question wants to know how much more. That is subtraction. So here's how this all translates out. So then I did, since I saw I had subtraction and a negative, I did the keep, change trick, whatever you want to call it. So I'm keeping this. I'm going to change the minus to a plus, and I'm going to change the sign of the second value. Now I'm just looking at 4350. So I've just transformed it to 4350 plus 2400. So then I'm just going to add it up. So let's see, 4350 plus 2400 gives me 6750. All right, so let's talk about whether or not that makes sense now. If you look at the graph, and they gave you this graph for a reason, November is way down here at negative 2400. December ends up at 4350. But in order to just get to zero, they had to have made back their losses. So they made $2,400, got to zero, then made an additional $43.50 to get up here and end here. That means this length of earnings was the $67.50 that we got for an answer. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions? Okay, I'm going to assume you guys are good. Let's see here. I'm going to stop with that. So I'm going to do 2 more, and then if everybody's good, we'll stop there. I just want to make sure that we get some practice here. All right, so we'll do number 4. Through exercise, Jamal went from 8 pounds above his ideal weight to 6 pounds below it. How many pounds did he lose? So he started 8 pounds above, so we'll make that positive 8, and ended 6 pounds below. So below will represent that with a negative. How many pounds did he lose? So he lost that much. Some people get caught up with the fact that they don't know what his ideal body weight is. So we'll talk about that here in just a second. You don't really need to know. You just need to set it up like this. Just like the last problem, you're subtracting a negative. A double negative is positive. So we keep, change, and we change. 8 plus 6 is 14.
Look at you. Don't look at me.
Don't look at you. All right, I won't. He lost 14 pounds. So let's talk about what happened here. Let's say his ideal body weight was 180 pounds. He started 8 pounds above this. So he started at 188 and he ended up 6 pounds below this. So he ended up at this. This is ideal. I'm just making it up. If he started 8 pounds above and ended 6 pounds below, then 188 minus 174 should be 14, and it is. That's how this works, and that's why it translates the way that it does. Okay, then let's do one more. Let's do number 5. Okay, so this morning the temperature was -5. By 3 p.m. it increased 20 degrees. Now what was the temperature at 3 p.m.? So this is very straightforward translation. You just have to remember what to do when you're adding different signs. So adding never gets changed. You just decide you've got different signs. That means subtract the values and keep the sign of the bigger one. So in this case, it's 20, so it's 15 degrees by 3 p.m. All right, I'm going to stop to give people who are not on the call on Tuesday a chance to ask me anything that they need to. If you have any questions about what we did today, ask me now first before I do that. Anybody have any questions for me right now?